So good afternoon to you all. We are into the semi-final for the senior category storytelling, and the task before us will be the individuals will have to narrate a 4-minute story highlighting the role of the judiciary in the governance and the need for fair access to justice. And they will end their story with, in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth. And before you, I'll be second Jibril together with
Angela Arinda.
Catherine Ampire.
And without taking any more time, allow me call Tendo to present her story.
Good afternoon to all of you. My story is entitled Justice Beyond Cost. I begin in 3, 2, 1. I was the girl that was supposed to be the heir of my family. 15 years back when my grandmother died, I will say that I was the one supposed to inherit our family's land and legacy. But instead of getting respect, I got rejection from my relatives, the well-connected ones. They had already sold the land, and they told me to leave and find a place to stay. They did not even have the decency to tell it to me, but they sent a notice a week after my grandmother was buried. I was perturbed, but I wasn't going to let them take what was mine without a fight. Of course, I had to go to the authorities, but as if my pleas were falling on deaf ears. That's when it dawned on me that there was a price to pay for justice. What was this? What was wrong with the judicial system? Since when did justice have a price attached to it? From what I knew and from what I learned, every single person deserved justice. Every single person deserved the right to fair treatment. They told me I was poor. They told me I did not have any money and it did not matter at all. Of course, this pain built within me, and it shaped what I became today. Because the judicial system is not what it is. It's not only supposed to make the laws, but it's also supposed to uphold these laws, to make sure that these laws are passed on and ensured with equality and fairness. This judicial system is also supposed to make sure that all conflicts are solved between people, individuals, and communities, and even in government sectors. Why do I think fairness should be there? Really, why? Because if there's no fairness in the judicial system, we're not going to have confidence in it. This is going to increase corruption in our country if there's no fairness at all. And also, if there's fairness in the judicial system, the minor groups are protected, the vulnerable people, those who do not have money. Because in order to get justice, it must not matter about your socioeconomic status. Being a lawyer wasn't my choice. It was a call from my ancestor, my grandmother. That pain of being denied justice at a very young age simply because I was poor trained me to become what I am today and make sure no one else gets denied justice because of their socioeconomic status. I have trained myself to make sure that there is fairness and justice for every single person. And that is why I believe that in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth.
Okay, thank you so much for that story. Next, let's have Joy.
I will begin my story in 3, 2, 1. Is it true that blood is thicker than water? You see, 15 years ago, there were two boys that grew up together. These two boys, just 3 years in difference, were closer than any other. So these boys, one was called Joseph, tall, black, but handsome, and the other Peter, short but brown and smart. And these boys together grew up in the sun, grew up with sunshine, grew up with love. But of course, where there's good, there must also be evil. And so evil was sown in the heart of Joseph. Joseph looks at Peter, his 3 years old younger brother, looks at him with disgust, with despair, hoping to get what he wanted. Every time that Peter was praised, Joseph would get anger in his heart. He would be so deceived. He would feel like he was cheated of what he really wanted. So as they grew up, they shared dreams of starting a school together, dreams of having a life together. So as these boys put their funds together to help build a school, to put the funds of Elara village together, these boys from the school called Hallmark Academy. Hallmark Academy was branded by the two brothers so that they could help the people who couldn't afford education and people that could afford education together. But as the evil in Joseph's heart grew bigger and bigger and bigger, he wanted to take the school for his own. So one night when Peter was out, Joseph got the files. He forged his names onto them, rubbing those of his brother he called Joseph, called Peter. And as he watched the papers burn, as he watched his self grow, Peter came to him and asked him, Joseph, what is this? Joseph, how could you do this to me? We started this school together. We funded it together. How could you do this to me? But of course, Joseph was so proud of himself. He was finally going to get the wealth he gets. And as he took himself, Peter decided that he was going to take his own brother, Joseph, to court. And as he took him to court, Joseph had taken a lawyer, and the lawyer that he got was not only one of the most prominent lawyers that he got with his funds, but Peter, since he couldn't afford, Peter walked into that courtroom without a lawyer, and as justice doesn't have it, Joseph won the case. Joseph with his money won the case, and Peter's life was destroyed. There and then, Joseph's ranks grew higher and higher and higher as he managed to get a place in the seat of being an ambassador, just because of all the prominent developments he did on his own as a man of justice, as a man of fair. As Peter stood on the side, dying on his own, his blood crying for justice, as he was taken away, not given what he desired. And in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth. That's fine.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, let's have Martha.
Okay, so I begin my story in 3, 2, 1. Article 42 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda 1995 provides that any person appearing before any administrative official or body has the right to be treated justly and fairly and shall respect of any administrative decision taken against him or her. Something that I only got to know after passing through law school. Every time I look at myself, I see the memory of my childhood 15 years ago. A horror that I cannot run away from, brought back by the lack of peace, justice, and that of a weak institution. To feel pain, I do not need to cut myself. I simply just need to close my eyes and imagine what happened to me 15 years ago. The death of my grandmother was the opening scene to this nightmare that haunts me to this day. To see the image of myself in a blue dress, she made me crying hard at night in belief that tears could drown the pain of the only person you dearly loved being buried under the earth's soils. That night, as I clung onto my bed sheet in my blue dress, crying hysterically, I feel my blankets being pulled away from me by who in the darkness I thought was my relative. But as I looked up, in the purity of light, they were simply demons unmasked. They informed me that the land is now theirs and being sold, hence no longer my home, and that I should leave. This part of my nightmare is always what starts to build my heart race. I close my eyes, and as much as I want to open them, I see myself packing all I knew on the command as though a black slave in the cotton-picking farm. But I was no black slave. But what I did pick was something that I thought could help relieve my shattering mirror that I called my life. It was the will of my grandmother that indicated me as the sole heir. So as my home door was closed on me, I went on to open that of the authorities, which is the scariest part of the horror that drives me insane after all of these 15 years. I go to them and I tell them of my situation. I see my eyes red with pain, tears falling down on me, and the authorities needn't care any less. But as I look at them, my conscience thinks of me as I'm trying to drown myself out of the nightmare that still haunts me all these years. I think of Lady Liberty. I think of the statue of Lady Justice, which goes to the term that justice is blind. I see the people in front of me discussing on as if I am non-existent in their presence. But at that exact moment on that night that happened 15 years ago, I see a dark man pull up in a suit out of a Hummer H3, slipping them 50,000 notes. And immediately at that moment, as though awakened from their daydreams, they begin to work actively fast on this person who I believe was of a higher economic status than I was at that point. I sat there watching them work on the man in the dark suit who walked out of the H3 Hummer prototype as I was in my dress, my blue dress with holes, tears down on me, and Vaseline body crying for help, and I dusted legs all those years ago in the pursuit of fairness, justice, and peace in my life. I believe that if they did pay attention to me, they could have provided me an advocate, legal aid, attorney, or public defender who would have gone on to open my home door and become an heir. But at that exact moment, the door of the orphanage was what was open for me, and that justice continued to be blind. I believe they never went on to do their part of ensuring accountability, justice, and safeguarding the Constitution and promoting social justice and fairness. Because in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's have Farida.
It was a Sunday evening as I furiously stomped to the local council chairperson. Could I please repeat that? It was one Sunday evening as I furiously stomped to the local council court's chairperson's home to report my uncle Musa, who had greedily sold my property that was rightfully mine as it stated in my grandmother's will. But when I reached the local council court, the chairperson told me that that court had limited jurisdiction to handle a case like mine, and so he directed me to the magistrate's court. I didn't know where the magistrate's court was, but luckily he gave me directions. I walked for 5 long hours to get to the magistrate's court. And when I got there, they gave me this very long procedure on how to file a court case that I didn't know how to handle. So I just went to the chief magistrate's office and I found a tall, dark-skinned man, and I just told him my story. I told him that I needed to get my property back. This man sympathized with me. He listened to me and he told me, "Young girl, come back tomorrow. We are going to get you justice." The following day when I went back, this man told me, "You see, your case is actually very complicated. Actually, it's also very expensive, and I know you will not afford the litigation costs. So why don't you just get out of my office and save our time?" Just like that, a man who was willing to help me had suddenly changed. Later, I found out that my uncle had paid them a visit. And obviously, he had learned of how I had started seeking for justice. And so the dots started connecting. My uncle Musa had probably thrown them a bone, and like the greedy dogs they were, they had taken it. And in doing so, they had closed all the doors of me getting justice. They had stripped me of my birthright without remorse, guilt, or whatsoever. They had failed me. They had broken my trust in the system. The judiciary, the so-called protectors of fairness, were greedy, unfair, and had no integrity at all. I somehow managed to go to law school. And today, as a lawyer, I see the judiciary being reduced to mockery, being used as a tool by people who are rich to manipulate their way into getting what they want, while people like me fight a losing battle. But I know that justice can be possible for all of us if only the judiciary did its work in governing this country. Not only just being an institution, but making sure that even the rich and the poor stand as equals in front of the law. By putting funds to support by establishing funds to support litigation costs for poor people so that they can be able to pursue justice without financial burdens. They can make justice accessible to every single person by decentralizing the services offered by complicated courts to rural areas. Bring the courts closer to the people so that the people can actually be able to locate these courts. Sensitize the people on the procedures and the different courts they need so that they can be informed on what to do when they have a legal problem. The judiciary should know that in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth.
Okay, thank you so much for that story. Let's have Ivy.
inspiration for me becoming a lawyer was actually because of a memory. And this memory was not one that was appealing or one that was arousing. It was one of pain, subtle pain. 15 years ago, my grandmother passed away. And my wonderful relatives, or what should I call wolf in sheep's clothing, came and presented themselves, and they were like, Ivy, step up and get out of this house. I turned to them and asked, I have just lost my grandmother, the head of this home. Why are you chasing me away? They had no reply. All they did was force me cacamoniously and drove me out. On being driven out, I looked through my things and I said to myself, what am I going to do now in this lost world? And then I saw a piece of paper, a ray of hope, only to open and see that it was the will of my grandmother. And it clearly stated that I was to be the heir. I walked to the judicial system because they are the guardians of the rule of law. I went to them and presented the will, and they said, child, you will need an attorney, you will need this, you will need that. They made the procedure so difficult. And I couldn't do anything. My hands were tied. I had nothing to do in this system. Yet it is them who are supposed to be interpreting the law. It is them who are supposed to be helping me resolve the disputes. It is them who are supposed to help me enforce the will and protection of my rights as the rightful heir. But did they do that? No. I had to pursue, and I said to myself, if they're not going to do it for me, I will do it for myself. I pursued a course in which I was doing law, and currently I stand here. I say to you, judiciary, in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's have Namig a day.
I grew up in a home where I was raised by my grandmother. A big home with so many relatives. Uncle Kalolo and Aunt Mudola, who called me their pretty, lovely princess. On the day when I lost my grandmother, these queens that called me their princess, like hungry lions ready to pounce on their prey, wanted to send me out of my home. You see, the only thing I knew in my life was my grandmother, because she's all I called my blood. On this fateful day, I was packing up my stuff, and that's when I found the note. It was the will, my grandmother's will. And it said I was the one to take over everything that she owned. But you see, to me, it was not just about that. But at this point of desperation, I knew I had something to do. I knew I needed to save my life. They pushed me out, they pulled my hair, they tore my skirt just to get me out of my own home, their little princess. I went to the local council chairperson, who was my grandmother's close friend. At least I thought so. He welcomed me until I told him my grandmother is dead and I need your help because her will has my name on it. He said he didn't want anything to do with this. And then after his voice silenced and he said, you know what, go home, I'll handle this case. When he sent me home, I hoped maybe he's going to find a solution to this until we received a call from home, and it was giving my uncle the permission to actually send me out of my own home. I was desperate. I was broken. I could not understand what was going on right now. I went to the local council police, still trying to find help. They beat me up. They thought I was a thief. They called me street child because my skirt was torn. And they did not help me. They sent me out. Except for one who said, you can try the court, the children's court. Out of all this broken-heartedness I had, I went to the children's court and found a lady. Her name was Mrs. Ampire. She saved my soul. She found me lying down there on the floor, crying and begging for help. And she took me to an NGO, Bayamba NGO, which educated me to be the lawyer I am now. I remember during my internship, I worked on cases like a woman who had been sentenced for self-defense against her violent husband. Successfully, we did win. A stepmother who burnt her son's fingers, tied him up on the wood. His fingers were rotting, and still they wanted to serve her justice. But because of what I believed in, we won, and the boy was taken to our home. He found a new father. He found a new family. His father's salary was cut for him to be paid for fees, and his stepmother was arrested. You see, through this, I remembered that back home I had not solved something. So I went home and I called my family to court. And I showed them the will that my grandmother had written. And through this, I remained standing for justice. And I found out that in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that story. Next, let's have Bia.
Right now, as I sit down and look at this paper, I realize that I've gone through a lot. You know, if my memory serves right, 15 years ago, when Uncle Joseph said, move out, this is not your place. Look at yourself. Do you even look like any of us? That is when I found this paper. At that time, it did not make sense because when I saw it, I first showed it to him and I said, Uncle, does this statement say any will made before this is invalid? And I want Serena to take everything. You know, he told me, no, those are just papers thrown around by kids. Did you write it yourself? Do you want me to sue you? What is the meaning of the word sue? At that moment, I did not know. You know, I left home. When he sent me out, I thought this is child abuse. That is what I thought this was. I moved out, I went straight to the police. And the policeman said, young girl, are you lost? Are you mad? Are you crazy? What are you doing here? I said, no. Maybe I'm wrong about this. And I remembered our SSC teacher telling us that the magistrate's court is there. Maybe something about judiciary, parliament. I said, no. I moved up to the court. And I met a man with a wig-like thing in that place. And he told me, young lady, young girl, don't be confused. This is not your place. If you have that paper, we do not see any validity in it. I left that place in tears. I cried so much. I cried to the extent that my eyes dried up. And right now, as I tell this story, I do not have to cry because I have cried enough. I stand here as a lawyer because I believe that we all deserve it. We deserve justice. We deserve the best.
If the judiciary is to uphold the law, if it is to make the law, let it make it. And we are here to uphold that law. That is why I believe that in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth.
Thank you so much. Let's have Phillip.
Good afternoon to you all. I am Katura Phillip Musozi, and this is my story. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. 15 years ago, I lived with my relatives and my grandmother. It was a small little house, but it was enough. We were run by her, and she was a kind, wise, strong, intelligent woman who commanded respect from each of us. It was because of her I learned moral values. I learned things that have guided me in my life till this day, until she passed on. You see, that was a pivotal moment in my life and in the life of all my relatives. See, it was then that everything plunged into chaos. All my relatives looking for anything that they could pick and grab out of my way. And once the idea of selling the land just to make money came into their heads, they didn't hesitate. Quickly they came to me, told me to evacuate, told me that they're going to sell this land and I was of no need staying here. I thought, why? Why, there's no need for this. They were taking everything that I had, my childhood, my memories, everything that my grandmother had built till the day she died. So that day, I went up to my room, tears in my eyes. I was packing. And at the corner of my eye, I noticed a small folded piece of paper. I was compelled by it. I picked it up and read it. It was her will. It was her will, and in that will it stated that I was to be the heir of this land, not them. They were selling, technically, my property. Now, with a little glimmer of hope that I had in me now, I ran to the local authorities. I tried to tell them what it was, because I couldn't decipher it as far as knowing that I was now owner of the land, technically. He looked at me and disregarded me, saying that these are family issues, that these are things that I should handle with my relatives. Like as if I knew better. I thought they were supposed to provide justice. I thought they were supposed to be the reason I am able to get fair treatment. I was wrong. In that moment, in desperation, I looked around because I had nowhere else to go. I was thankfully, luckily, taken in by an orphanage. And it was from there I discovered a new purpose. A new purpose not only just for myself, but for everyone who was entitled to justice. It was from there that I discovered the drive in me to pursue law. Not just because it was something I was passionate about, but it was because I felt it in me that everyone had a right to justice. Do they not? So in all my years of pursuing it, I became familiar with the law, familiar with the judiciary, and I realized that the only reason why people are unable to receive a fair treatment of justice is because the opposite party has a better bank account, fuller pockets, and for some reason, just even though you're in the right, you're just not rich enough. This was going against everything that my grandmother had taught me. This was not my moral compass. This was not something that the judiciary should stand for. At least that's what I thought. And I worked on it. I implemented it. For years, I had been serving, providing justice for those who deserved it. For I was here to make a stand and provide justice for those who are unable to speak for themselves, just like I wasn't 15 years ago. You see, the judiciary is not supposed to be a body that's supposed to bend the law just because you oiled their palms. No. Supposed to be here so that we are able to provide the justice, the means that you need so that you can attain what is right for you. And in that case, you should all realize that in the pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that story. And next we can have Wangolo.
My name is Ernest, and I'll begin my story in 1, 2, 3. A hidden weapon. Memories of our lives, our works and our deeds will continue in others as we enhance justice as a royale for battle. In 1986, down. It gives me a lot of anxiety. Having found out that she had left a will for me. A will to succeed in life as the best. But as I arrived to the centers of the police stations, imagine what they told me. You have no lawyer, you have no capabilities of being in law. This has been paining me for years of suffering. I had nobody to help me with my studies. But here I am now. 15 years of struggling. I'm a lawyer. And imagine, I'm also standing on this platform, trying to advise those people, encouraging them, telling them about what governance is all about, ensuring fair distributes among resolutions, handling human rights of all the people, holding the culprits that bring all the disadvantages in our communities. Just concentrate as a person. You should just concentrate on being faithful to the truth. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Since when you do agree with people to defend them, do it for them, don't do it as you. You have to strive and see that everybody gets justice. That's why this word runs in my mind. In the pursuit for fairness, justice must be blind to the wealthy.
Okay, thank you so much for that story. Next, we can have Chibet.
15 years are now down the road. I was a young boy, probably growing up in an extended family where there was enough love but scarcity of resources. With time, my grandmother, who had been the pillar, the foundation from where the family stood, perished and she was nowhere. I lost the hope. I became a child that has been abandoned. During her burial, where something dangerous happened. My uncles, my aunties, my cousins all say that the family land had to be sold. But I never heard anything about the wishes of my grandmom in the will. They said I would have to leave the house. When I was in my room packing my belongings to leave, I stumbled on a piece of paper. I stammered. I picked it and felt the urge to read. As I read, I trembled a lot. Inside it had evidence that I am the heir of the family. But then people were irresponsible, are planning to sell everything. But who was I? I was just a kid. A glimmer of hope and anger together rose in my heart. I jumped up and said, let me go direct to the lawyers who handled her case, the case of my grandmom. As I reached there, they had, but they did not act. I had landed in wrong hands, where wealth spoke louder than truth. They said the will is not complete. It lacks some legal entities, which will in this world becomes incomplete. I had nothing to do. I was seen as a war child, an added problem in the jungle, kicked out of the family. But there was one man who found favor in me and said, let me take care of this young man. I grew up, studied, and I became a lawyer. Now I am a practicing lawyer. I have learned a lot about judiciary. Judiciary is an independent body, far away. It's a place where everyone raises his voice, a place of hope, a place where everyone is given justice, not disparity, but not the lies whereby justice has eyes on wealth. Because if it becomes something that relies only on wealth, it becomes a tool of oppression. It becomes a tool of oppression by those who have the money, and a barrier to those ones who are being suppressed. I had nothing, but now as I move, as I handle cases in court each and every time, I don't do it because I want to earn a living, but I want to uphold justice. I don't want people to suffer the way I suffered. People to feel the way I felt lonely, being abandoned by your own relatives. Each and every case I learn a lesson. I learn one thing, that justice is not about wealth. It's about the truth, standing for what is right, even when no single person is looking at you. Because one thing we have to understand, that in pursuit of fairness, justice must be blind to wealth. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. At this point, allow me call Michael, who's the final person in presenting today.
I begin on 1, 3, 2, 1. Have you ever felt betrayed? Have you ever felt unloved? Have you ever felt what it feels like to be denied justice? Well, I have. I have. You see, when I was young, they called me the unfortunate child. My mother, she died during giving birth to me, but that wasn't the saddest part. You see, 15 years ago, I knew this emotion more than anyone my age should have. My father, he left me, and he decided that I was the reason for my mother's death. And it was true to an extent. This hurt me, but this is not why I'm here. 15 years ago, the number 15, oh how I hate the number 15. You see, my grandmother, the only person in the world that cared for me, died. And then at the burial, I met my uncle, Uncle Fide. Uncle Fide, oh how I hate that name, Uncle Fide. Uncle Fide promised me a roof over my head. He promised me heaven and earth, but the devil is a liar. Uncle Fide lied. I went to his home, and do you know what he told me? He said he recruited a new maid, and guess who was the maid? It was me. He tortured me, he battered me, but that was not the end of everything. He asked me, where is the paper? I asked him, which paper? He said, young boy, don't you lie to me. I do not have the time or the merit for your nonsense. I was scared. I was but a child. Turns out the paper was a will. 1 week later, Uncle Fide got tired. He told me, leave my house at once. And I had to leave. But as I packed my belongings, the only things I had but a short and a trouser and a shirt. In the pocket of that old leather trouser, I found the paper. The paper was the will. And this will said I was the heir. Which was funny, because Uncle Fide had sold every single thing my grandmother owned. There was nothing. There was nothing left for me. But I felt hope. In that little paper, I felt hope, but it was a lie. I went to a local lawyer that I knew, and I thought he would help me, but he didn't. He told me, help me with the will, I revise it, but he didn't. He decided to give the will to Uncle Dide at a price of only 1 million shillings. Is that how cheap dignity is? Is that how cheap my future was? But luckily, I was a good student in class and I got a scholarship. They decided to take me further in my education, and I had a cause. To put justice in the lives of others, because no one, and I mean no one, should face what I faced. You see, I continued with my course, and I became a lawyer, and later I became a practicing lawyer. You see, there are many cases that come to me with the same story, a story of betrayal, sadness. So in conclusion, in the pursuit of fairness, justice should not be blind to wealth.
Okay, so thank you so much. And that was the final story that brings us to the end and to the close of the semi-finals of the senior category. And yeah, we will resume yet again when we are going in for the finals, which will be tomorrow. Thank you all, and may the best proceed to the finals.